But to do this case without a wax-up was quite simple. I took an impression, an alginate impression of the patient without their bridge, and I took an alginate impression of the patient wearing their bridge. And these data were merged into the planning software. The other question was, how do you merge the data in? The software has the facility to allow merges of different data sets on the basis of fiducial markers or on the basis of anatomy. So that's built into the Blue Sky Plan 3 software. So when I planned this case, I made the bridge slightly translucent. And basically, I just brought the implant into position. I rotated it. I put an abutment on it and rotated it and lined it up with the center of each tooth. And once I had this one in, I duplicated it, and I lined it up with the center of the next tooth. And the same thing going on down the line so that each implant is in the center of the tooth. I had no idea how this would shake out with the bone, but I placed it, first I shot for ideal position. So that was in the mesial distal dimension. And then buccal lingual, I'm able to see exactly where these are. The center line of the implants are in the center of each bicuspid, incisal edge, incisal edge. So that was the first phase of planning. I'm able to project the outlines of the temporary bridge onto the cross sections. So this is the tooth number 4. This is the second bicuspid. And here we have an outline of the temporary bridge. So now I was able to take the implant. Here's the bone. There was a sinus graft done. And I'm able to line it up in the bone and in the central fossa of that implant. I'm sorry, of that crown, of that temporary crown. And we go to the next, number 5, same thing. A little buckle to the central fossa, but still quite ideal. Go to number 6. We were fortunate the bone was getting thinner here, but still allowed me to line it up with the incisal edge. And finally, number 7, same thing. So in terms of ease, I mean, from where I'm sitting, this is a lot easier than having to set up a large wax-up. And it's extremely accurate, and it's a very streamlined way of getting implants in the correct position in a totally restorative-driven environment. There are tools here whereby you can parallel one implant with another and things like that. And finally, I can superimpose the temporary bridge on top of the patient's anatomy, bony anatomy, and get a look at the relationship between this implant and the adjacent tooth, and this implant and this adjacent tooth, as final confirmation that these implants are in safe positions. So that's one example of using a large temporary bridge as future tooth position.
There's a question that came in, if you could explain a bit where you put markers on the alginate tray. Do you use a plastic tray and then place them on the tray?
We've got On the alginate tray?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they're on the back of the alginate tray. The back of the alginate tray, think of it as a horseshoe, and you put 3 on one side, 3 on the other, and 1 in the center. So if you think about it, when you take that impression, so the protocol for if you have a scanner in your office, it's a very, very nice protocol. You make a set of trays like that. You put the alginate tray, you take an impression of your patient. With the impression tray in your patient's mouth, you put them in the scanner and scan them. You then remove the tray, pour the stone model. Do not remove the model from the tray. You now scan the tray in your scanner. So as you can see, that merge will be absolutely perfect. Where the gutta-percha points are entirely in a different plane than any scatter you could possibly have. So you get dead-on merges every time with that system. And again, scatter is a big deal when it comes to merging files if you're doing optical scanning. And by doing these methods, scatter is absolutely irrelevant to our merges, and we have phenomenal confidence in our merges. Again, there are pictures of these, of the alginate tray and of the scan appliance on our website. Oh, and we've just sent everyone in the meeting a link to the website, to that particular part of the website that will illustrate those, the scan appliance and the alginate tray. Any other questions, Michael?
No, that's all for now.
Okay. This is a surgery. This is that patient, the one we just planned. This is their surgery, and this was done with a tube guide. Here you can see the ridge that we're using. Here's the tube guide in place. When I raise flaps, I often like to make bleeding points with an endofile. I'm trying to retain attached gingiva, so the bleeding points serve as guidelines for my incision. So I'll make my incisions right through the bleeding points because I know those are the center lines of my implants. So I make my incision. Here you can see our tube guide in place, and you can very easily raise a flap with our tube guide. We do not have a flange covering the site. So we can do tubeless, we can do flapless surgery, or you can elevate a flap. Here's the ridge, and again with the tubes, I just went through with my twist drills, creating osteotomies. Here are the osteotomies, number 4, 6, and 7. Again, I'm using a tube guide to center my driver to place an implant. And here's the final case. Here's the closure. And again, my reason for raising a flap here was I wanted to retain a thick band of attached gingiva on all of these teeth. And here's with the bridge in place. You can see the relationships and the radiographs of the implants. So that's an illustration of a case that was done using a temporary bridge as for future tooth position. The next case involves the use of a flipper for future tooth position. And this is an upper anterior case. Okay, so this patient is missing 7 through 10, and the restorative doc indicated that these teeth are in the correct position to represent the future teeth, and so this was done much in which the previous case was done. Implants were placed, centered in each tooth. 7, 8, and 10. The cross-sectional view of the flipper was projected onto the cross-sectional views. number 7. Number 8, nice outline of the incisor. And number 10. So the patient had a reasonably wide ridge. So you can see there was, the challenge on this case actually was to get the implants as buccal as possible. I'll show you that when we look at the ridge. But you can see that in a case like this, it was quite easy, without a wax-up, using the flipper as future tooth position. So now we've done that. Again, there's some fine-tuning. I don't mean to let you think that, it's done this quickly. There is a lot of fine-tuning to do when you do this. But these are the basic principles of how we do this in the different dimensions. So again, we can make structures disappear, and now you can see where you are on the ridge. Sometimes when you do this, things will look quite ideal, but you'll find out that buccolingually you're the wrong spot on the ridge, and you have to go back and recalculate. But by having this view of the ridge, as you would clinically, you can discern that before you have a guide made. And you can see the relationship between the teeth. You can put the flipper back and see where you are. And also by adjusting the density threshold, you can get a sense of the relationship between the root and this implant, and the number 7 implant and this cuspid. So that's using a flipper for future tooth position. So far we've used articulated models, we've used temporary bridge, we used a flipper, and there's another case here where we use a bridge that had to be cut out because one of the abutments failed. This tooth had a resorptive defect and had to be removed. But before the prosthodontist resected the pontics from this bridge, I snapped an alginate. So I'm superimposing two models here, two models, one with and one without the pontics. So you can see how that simple alginate gives me future tooth position. And again, I can project, as we did before with the temporary bridge, I can project the outline of the pre-existing pontics onto the cross-sectional view. And you can see exactly where you are. And you can adjust as needed. I'm not going to beat you to death with this case, and we'll move on. I'd like to move on now to an edentulous case.